Hello everyone and welcome to another Fusion 360 Live. My name's Brad Tallis. I'm from Autodesk. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about how to create wire baskets like this one here. Actually, this came in from a customer and he was saying, what's the best way to create wire baskets? So I've actually come up with 3 different ways. And we're going to start from the very, very basic all the way to a little bit more advanced, making it more realistic. Unfortunately, my sidekick, Angelo, is on vacation this week, so I'm doing this solo. So we'll see how that goes. If you have any questions, what I'm going to ask is that maybe you put like 3 question marks at the beginning of your question. That way, if I have time, I'll scroll through the chat at the very end, and if there's any questions in there, I know a lot of people say, hey, how's it going, and all that kind of stuff. I'll try and scan for those questions. I also have a bunch of people online that might be able to answer the question for me. So if you're one of those people, please feel free to jump in and answer any of the questions that come through. I'll owe you for that. So let's dive right in. Okay, so actually, what you see on the screen, this is a real world example. I actually have one here. And so I use that to create this model. And what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to break this down into 3 different examples. The first one is where you're actually going to use the rendering environment and materials to simulate a wire mesh. So this is not the best solution for actually creating one of these, but if you're doing rendering or something like that where you need to have a basket or something similar, I'll show you these methods. So I'm going to just start out with a basic primitive. So I'm going to use the box primitive. And I'll just start here, and let's just make this maybe like a 6x3 or something like that. So I'm going to type in 6x3 and then hit enter. So it's doing the length of 6, the width of 3, and I can do it like the height of 3 also. So I'm just going to start with a basic primitive like so. Now I want it to be rounded on the corners, so I'm going to go ahead and fillet the corners. Let's just do maybe a 1/2 inch. That'll probably look good on here. So I'm just going to go ahead and select those corners. And then I'll do the same thing along the bottom. Now, if you don't know that little trick that I just did, I'm just going to right click and drag straight up, and it's going to repeat the last command that I did. In fact, if I right mouse click, you'll see this little dialog right here. And you'll see this little black line. This is what we call a gesture. And you'll notice that if I go straight up, it's going to repeat the last command, which was the fillet command. So cool little shortcut. So after I've already done a fillet, and I'm just going to right click and drag straight up, it puts me back into that fillet command. So hopefully you all know that neat little tip. Okay, so here's my basic shape. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit A for appearance. Okay, so under here you can see under the modify menu there's the appearance, and the shortcut key is A. So we're just gonna change the appearance. Now I want to go into, let's go into the metal into here. Oops. And then I'm gonna go into the brass. Now you'll notice in here there's a bunch of different materials like brass knurled, and so if I drag that on there, you're going to see it sort of simulates this knurled texture, or polished brass, etc. Well, if I keep scrolling down, you're going to see there's like brass mesh, holes, wire, etc. Okay, so for example, if I go to this hexagonal mesh and drag it on there, you're going to see that it looks like this hexagonal mesh, and you can see through it. You can see these edges kind of behind. Okay, so this is the little trick that we're going to use. In fact, I'm going to go to this wire small, and I'm going to drag that on there, and you'll notice that we get this little wire type mesh. Okay, now obviously a little too small, so I'm going to go back into my appearance here. And I'm just going to get rid of the ones that I don't need. So I don't need that guy. So I'm going to edit this mesh. And you can see right here is a scale. And if I start to click up, you can see that we can scale this. And I'm going to go until it looks pretty good. Let's just go maybe like up to, let's just do 90. Okay. Now you're probably going, this looks kind of weird. We're going to get to this. Okay. And again, like I said, this is a representation. We're going to get to actual modeling wires here in just a moment. Okay, so I now have this, and you can notice it almost looks like it's a woven mesh. And we're going to come back to that here in just a second. But you'll also notice that it's going across the top, and that is not what I want. So here's another neat little trick. Right here in the search window, I'm going to search for air. And it'll go through and search all of the materials, and it found air. You can kind of think of air as an empty or blank material. And instead of assigning it to the whole body, I'm going to assign it to a face. So I'm going to drag that to that top face, and you'll see that we no longer, see that mesh across the top. Okay, so let's just do a quick render so you can kind of see what this looks like by using this particular material. Okay, so now I'm in my render workspace. I'll just hit quick render, and you're going to see that it's going to look like a basket. Now it doesn't look great. We're going to fix that here in just a moment. But notice that you can see through the material, and that's kind of the key thing. This is a real fast way of generating a complex design, and I'll show you some examples of this here in just a moment. Okay. Now we notice a couple weird things. We notice all these little things sticking up at the top. We've got some weirdness going on in the corners and all that kind of stuff. So we can fix that by using this texture map controls. I'll go ahead and click on the box here, and you'll notice that it's set to automatic. Well, I'm going to change it to box because that's kind of what we're creating, right? So I'm going to switch it to box, and you'll notice instantly it looks better. And what it's basically doing is it's allowing us to edit in kind of a box type format. So I can edit that face there. I could bring this face over here. And so you can kind of see I can tweak with, if I have a weird corner right here, I could, bring this over a little bit until that looks nicer. I could bring this over a little bit until that looks good, something like that. Same thing with the top. Originally we had these, little sticks that were sticking up. So I'm going to drag this up until we're kind of across the top like so. And then you'll notice when I render this, we're going to get a nicer result. It's going to look more realistic, and it's going to look like an actual basket, for example. Okay, and in this case, it's a woven basket. Okay, so I'm not going to let it render too long. You get the idea. Just by using the texture map, I was able to kind of fix what this looks like. And a prime example of this is, if, for example, let's say you're designing shelving or something like that, and you want to have a bunch of these objects in here, a bunch of these baskets, you can literally start with a cube, or, in this case, kind of a rectangular cube. So we can, copy the number of baskets that we need, something like so. Let's just do maybe 2 in that direction. And then when I go to render this, so imagine those being in shelves and all that kind of stuff. We go to render, it's going to look, like actual baskets really quickly. So a very, very fast way of doing that. And that's why I wanted to show this particular process. Okay. Now, you might say, well, that's cool. How else could you use this? So I'm going to stop here and show you, for example, this is a microphone that I did a long time ago. In fact, I'm actually talking to you through this microphone. So that's what you're actually hearing me through. So let me change this real quick. If you look at the mesh, you'll notice, this mesh right here. I didn't model that. That's actually using that basket material that I just showed you, in a smaller scale, and I also changed it to be more metallic. And so it actually looks like, the wire mesh that's inside the microphone. It's literally just a solid. There's nothing in there, okay? Here's another example. This is from one of my customers. So the Colorado Department of Transportation, they use Fusion 360, and this is what they call a tool crib. They have these in some of their shops, and they make them themselves. They save a ton of money making it themselves, and they wanted to show what it was going to look like realistically. And if I zoom up, you'll notice there's this diamond plate mesh, or whatever you want to call it. And all it is, it's a solid. You can see it right here. It's just a solid body. In fact, if I were to, remove that material from there, let me just add this guy. It's just a solid plate. There's nothing. They just modeled a solid plate. Then they just dragged that material onto it. And then when they, want to show, some of the other shops or whatever, what they're making, they can actually put this. I mean, check this out. This is actually kind of cool. Let me go into here. Let's do an environment. They can actually put it in a shop and show what it would look like, in the corner of the shop or something like that. And then when they render that, it's going to look through it, and they'll actually see through and see the background through that mesh. And then again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time rendering this, but you kind of get the idea. Instead of physically modeling all of those little diamonds, that would have taken forever. They're just using a rendered material. So cool little trick, okay? So that's the first example. The next example I want to do is this parametric basket. And here we're actually going to physically start creating some wires, and we might want to change the underlying design and have it update. So that's what we're going to show next. Okay, so I'm going to start kind of the exact same way. I'm going to start with that box primitive. Okay, you can kind of think of this as almost like an envelope of our design. So let's do, in this case, let's make it like 8 inches by 4 inches by 4, I think. So this is kind of the starting shape I want to start with. I also want to have it like tapered or angled. So I'm going to add some draft. So I'm going to come into the draft. It's asking for the pole direction. So what I think of this is like, what are the edges that are going to get hinged? So I'm going to click on that face there. Now it's asking for the faces. And if I click on this face here, you can kind of see it's going to hinge on that face that I clicked on originally. So it's kind of a cool little trick. I'm going to go ahead and select those 4 other edges, or faces I should say, and let's just do maybe like an 8 degrees of draft. So I'm kind of defining the shape of my basket. I'll also go ahead and add some fillets on the corners. I'll make these fillets a little bit bigger than the last one. I'll right click and drag straight up to repeat that last command. And let's just make this guy, I don't know, like 3/8 or something like that. So 0.375. So there's kind of my basic shape of my basket. In fact, I'm going to expand this guy open, and I'm just going to call that starting shape. Okay. Okay, now I want to keep things symmetric, and if I turn on my origin, you'll notice my origin's kind of over here in the corner, and now that I've added draft and all that kind of stuff, these planes aren't going to help me very much, so I'm going to create a mid-plane. Under the construct menu, I'm going to do mid-plane. I'll click that face there and that face there, and you can see that it put a construction plane right through the middle. I've shown this before, but if you haven't seen it, you can actually change the size of your construction plane just by getting near the corner. You can grab these corners and make it any size you want. So just another tip if you didn't know that one. And then I'm going to go ahead and sketch on this plane. So I just select it, right mouse click and say create sketch. And this piece of paper is slicing right through the middle of this starting shape. Now I want to grab the shape of this, and you've seen me use the project command quite often. Well, there's another command inside the project menu called intersect. And this is actually really cool because what it allows you to do is I'm going to just click on the body and notice like I'm way over here. You can kind of see the preview. It's going to create a sketch of where the body's intersecting this piece of paper. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that body. I'll say OK. And if we turn that off, you can see it basically took an intersection of it all the way around. Now I don't need this top line, so I'm going to click on it and say delete. And now you can kind of see what we're doing here. We have this path that we're going to use to create some of our wires, and it's going to follow this shape. Okay? Okay, so I'm done with my sketch. We're going to use a cool command called the pipe command. So I could draw a profile, I'd have to put a plane on a path, I could draw a circle, I could sweep that along there. But this pipe command, it's asking for a path. All I have to do is get near that path, and you can see it's selecting the whole thing. And then it's asking for the distance, and that's a ratio from 0 to 1, so we want it to go the whole distance. It's a circular section. You can see you can do different shapes. And then it's asking the section size is basically the diameter. Okay, so in this case I'm going to do 0.125. We could make it hollow if we wanted it to be hollow. In this case, obviously it's not. And instead of cutting, I want to make this a new body. So I'm going to say new body. We'll say OK. And now you can see we have a piece of wire that basically follows our starting shape. Okay. Now let's go ahead and pattern this guy. So I'm going to do a rectangular pattern. What's the body? That's that one there. What's the direction? I'm just going to tell it to go, left and right. And you can see as I start to drag, it kind of gives me a preview. Well, I want it to go in both directions. So I'm going to come in here and say symmetric. And now you can see that it's going to go in both directions, and that's why we did that mid-plane to start out with. I can go ahead and increase the quantity. Okay, you can kind of see how that's starting to increase the quantity. And then it's also asking for the extent. Well, I'm going to say, let's go to this point right here. You can see it's going to kind of snap to that point. And as I increase the number, they're going to that corner basically. So let's do 9, because if I did 8, we'd have, one less on one side. So I'm going to go to 9 and say OK. And now you can see we have a bunch of wires that follow the particular shape. I also want to do a wire that goes around the top, so I'm going to go ahead and say pipe. I'll click that top edge there, and let's make this a little bit larger in diameter. Let's just make this 0.2, and again I'm going to say new body. Okay, and if I turn off my starting shape, you're starting to see how we're kind of building this in. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is, it's kind of hard to see, this end piece just kind of hangs down right here. Okay, and it doesn't really follow the body, so that's what we're going to do next. We're still going to use the underlying starting shape to do this. In fact, just to clean things up, I'm going to go ahead and combine all of these wires together. So let's just make that our target. What's the tool bodies? I'm just going to draw a selection box that crosses over them. We're going to join those together. Watch what happens over here. When I say OK, they're all joined into one body now. Okay? Okay, so now let's work on the ends. So I'm going to create a sketch on this angled side face. I'm going to say create sketch. Okay. Actually, let me turn that guy off, sorry. And then I'm going to project this angled face. I want to grab some information from there. Now I'm going to kind of mock up what I want that wire to look like. So I'm going to just start to draw a basic shape, something like this. I'm going to purposely make it look kind of weird just so you kind of see what's going on. So I'm just going to draw something like so. And then I want to fillet these corners. So I'm going to come into the fillet command. I'll click on that corner. And according to my measurements, it's 0.7 for the fillets. Okay. Then I'm going to put these points where they need to be. Now, some of you might be yelling through the screen, well, hey, you projected that face already. Why are you creating this extra geometry? Well, the pipe command is going to follow this path. And I want to be able to, give me just a second here. I want to be able to have these fillets here. But because this is projected geometry, it won't let me fillet that referenced projected geometry. So we're basically using the projected geometry to help us out. Okay, and this will make more sense once you see what's going on here. So I want to put this corner up here. So I'm going to use the coincident constraint. So I'm going to say that point is coincident with that point. Okay. Then I might come in here and say this point is coincident with that point. And now you can see, let me drag this around a little bit. You can kind of see what's going on. If I move some of these points, you can see how it's keeping those tangent, it's keeping those coincident. And I want to have this line always follow that line. So I'm going to say collinear. I don't use this constraint all that often, but it's useful in this example. So I'm going to say collinear, and I want that line to stay collinear with that line. You can see how it brought it over. I want that line to stay collinear, so in line with this. Now, why am I doing this? Well, when we go to change our parameters, I want this wire to grow with it. And again, you'll see this here in just a second. I'll say collinear with that guy there. We can see that the lines changed color, which means they're constrained. And I'll go ahead and finish my sketch. I know that seemed like a couple steps, but basically what we did there with a lot of me talking is we created a sketch on this side face, this angled face. We grabbed information from that face, and then we drew a quick sketch that's using the information from this starting shape. And this will, again, make more sense here in just a moment. So now I have a sketch that I can create a pipe on. Okay, now let me show you what I was talking about earlier. If I had only clicked on my projected geometry, you'll notice I get these tight corners and I can't fillet those corners. But by kind of tracing over it, I now get a shape that looks like this. And I get just the edges that I want. We'll make those the correct size. I'll make these a new body. I'll say OK. Let's turn on our other body there, and we can see that that wire is now at the same angle as the angle of our starting shape. Okay. And we used information from that. So this is awesome. Okay. So let's go ahead and instead of recreating that, let's mirror this. So I'm going to say mirror. I don't want to mirror faces, I want to mirror bodies. I'll click on that angled body. And then what's our mirror plane? Well, if I click on mirror plane, you'll notice nothing shows up except for my origin. Well, that's because if I expand open my construction folder, that plane is turned off. So if I turn that on, it's still there, so I can go ahead and click on it. I'll say OK. I'll turn that guy back off so it's not in our way. And then just like before, I'll combine these wires all into one. Okay, in fact, I could even rename this. Let's call it basket. Okay. The next thing I want to do is create these little loopy things. So again, going to use a sketch to do that. I'll turn on my starting shape. I'll go to the back of the model here and create a sketch. So once again, I'm using the starting shape to help me create these wires. Okay, let's go ahead and just draw some geometry here. I want that to be 1 inch in diameter. I'm just going to draw a quick rectangle here. And I might actually catch, yeah, so you'll notice I'm going to catch kind of to the center of this pipe right here. So I'm just going to come down like so. I'm just kind of mocking things up right now. I know I want that edge to be touching that circle. I want that edge to be touching that circle. So now they're coincident with each other. In fact, I could even come in here and let's trim those guys away. Let's create a curved fillet right here, 0.2. Again, just kind of using some dimensions I captured from modeling this earlier. Okay. And then I want to position where this needs to be. So now I'll just throw some dimensions on here. So I know from here to the edge of this pipe right here, that's going to be 2.5 inches. So I'm going to type in 2.5, and you can see how it slid over, and now it's more centered in between these guys. And then I know the height from here to here is supposed to be 1 inch. Okay. Now you'll notice some of my geometry turned black. Some of it is still unconstrained. And if I grab on it, I can kind of see what's going on there. Okay, that's kind of weird. So I want to define the width of this rectangle to be 0.4. But again, notice what my sketch did. It's kind of weird, right? So how would I fix this? Well, another cool trick. I want the center of this line, this horizontal line down here, to be perfectly in line with that guy. So I'm actually going to draw a line from the center of that line to that point right there. Okay. I don't want it to be an object line, so I'm going to change it to a construction line. And then I'm going to hit horizontal vertical. And it forces that line to become vertical. And because it's caught to the center of this line down here, it lines that up with that. It's a really kind of a quick way to bring things into symmetry, if you want to think of it that way. And now we can see that it's fully constrained. So I'm happy with that. I'll finish my sketch. We'll create a pipe. What's the path? I'll go ahead and click on this. Now you'll notice that it's actually going horizontal. That's fine in this case. I could turn off chain selection, and that'll actually let me click one segment at a time. So I could, continue adding these segments like so, and then not have it go across. So that's one way to do that. I also don't want to cut. I want to join. But be careful with this, because notice it might actually join with the starting shape. So I'm going to turn off starting shape, so the only thing it can join to is the basket, because that's the only thing that's displayed right now. And I'm not sure. I think this is going to be a larger diameter. It's 0.2 in this case. So you can kind of see how that thickens up. And if I say OK, that is all part of the basket. So I just created this little loop. Now they kind of weld this thing on, so I'm going to simulate that. I'm just going to create a quick fillet on these edges of, let's just do 0.1, and you can kind of see how it's going to create this nice looking fillet onto this top edge right here. I'll say OK. And I now have one of these hanging loops on our basket. Well, again, instead of creating it over again, we'll use the mirror command. So I'll come in here and say mirror. Now, instead of bodies, because this is all one body now, I'm going to change this to features. I love mirroring features. And I want to mirror the pipe feature and the fillet feature. So you can see I can actually select both of those from my timeline, and it's doing the pipe and the fillets at the same time. What's my mirror plane? I'll just turn that guy back on real quick, and I'll say OK. And we now have the two hanging loops. So pretty quickly, we were able to model something like this parametrically. And this is where the fun part happens. Okay, so we've designed this basket. Now we want to make some changes to it. So let's go all the way back to the very beginning. So I'm going to edit this primitive here. And instead of 4 inches in width, let's make it 3. And you're going to see that it's going to change in width. I'll say OK, and check out what happened. It's now narrower in this direction. Okay, let's take it to the next level. We've changed the width. Let's change the height. Let's make that maybe like 8, for example. I'll say OK, and now we have this wire basket that's taller. Maybe we don't want as much draft on it, so let's go to the draft feature, and instead of like 8 degrees, let's just do maybe like 1 degree of draft. And there we go. So by spending a little bit of time to begin with, kind of creating this and making it parametric, we can now make a bunch of different shapes using these primitives. So let's just go back. Let's go make it like 3, for example, and say OK. And now we have a little soap dish or something like that. And then just for fun, let's jump over into the render workspace. We can kind of see what this thing is going to look like. We could add a material to it if we wanted to. So if I come in here and say A for appearance, we could make it, let's do old brass just for fun. Drag that on there, and it's going to look like, old textured brass, for example. It's pitted or whatever. Okay. Hopefully you found that example kind of cool. We actually created wires. We made it so we can parametrically change it. And the next thing we're going to do is like, how would you manufacture this? So I'm going to hopefully we can see this on the screen. So you can see these wires are actually inside this bigger wire. So obviously they welded or whatever the smaller wires to this bigger wire. And we didn't do that in this example. I basically made the wires kind of go into the bigger piece. Okay, so this next example, we're going to do this again similarly, but we're going to spend a little more time making sure that this thing's manufacturable. In this third example, I'm actually going to use the form command. So this create form. We're going to do sort of similar, but you're going to see the power behind this. So I'm going to start with, again, a primitive. Now this is our T-spline environment. So I'm going to go ahead and create a form. This time it does let me pick a center rectangle, which is actually pretty cool. So I want, let's do the length of this. Let's just make it 8. The width, let's make it a little bit wider. Let's make it 5. And then, oops, darn it, I did that too fast. Let me do that again, sorry. We'll go here. Let me do this. I'm going to say length is 8. Let's do the width of 5, okay? And then the height, I think I'm going to make 5 also. And you can see it looks kind of pillowy. I don't know if there's a better term for that. I'm going to be using these lines to help me with my design. So I'm actually going to add more of these lines by grabbing this little slider. You can see there's a plus and a minus. So I'm just kind of dragging left or right, and it allows me to add more detail. So in this example, I'm going to do probably maybe 7 lines in this direction. And I want more in this direction, so I'm going to kind of rotate and grab this guy. And let's just do, you can see you could add multiple ones in here, but let's just do maybe 3, just to kind of keep things a little simple here. And then same thing for the height. I'm going to grab this slider here, and I can add, let's just do maybe 6 in this case. So you can kind of see it's starting to look more like a square box, but it's giving me a lot of lines that we're going to use. I also want to make sure that this is symmetric. So I'm going to come in here and set my symmetry to mirror. I'm going to turn on my length and my width. Now, I don't know if this is 100% necessary, but it does help speed things up. I'll go ahead and say OK. And I now have this weird looking sliced piece of loaf of bread, basically. Okay. I'm going to do the exact same thing where I want to angle the faces. So I'm going to look at the top, draw a box, and it selects all of those faces. Now you'll notice because I have my mirror symmetry turned on, it selected all those faces over there also. Then I'm going to edit the form. Now I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about T-splines and form editing and like that. This is used a lot for like doing surfacing type stuff, organic shapes like hair dryers and stuff like that. But we're going to use this to help us out. Now I want to rotate these faces, so I'm going to click on this transform rotate. I'm just going to start to drag, and you can see that it's going to rotate all of those faces. And let's just do, let's just do maybe like 8 degrees of draft. I'll say OK. And then I'll do the same thing over here. Let's draw a selection box around those guys. I'll edit the form, and let's just rotate those about 8 degrees. And now I've kind of got this tapered block. Now I don't need the top, so let's look at it from the front. I'm just going to draw a box around the top faces, like so, and then hit the delete key on my keyboard. And notice what it did. It kind of opened it up, and now it's starting to look a little bit more like a basket, right? Well, what's neat about this is it's giving us a lot of lines and points and stuff to catch to. Okay. So if I expand this guy open, I can see the name. Now what I'm going to do is I want to have some wires run like on the inside of these wires here, and then I want maybe these wires here running on the outside. And this again will make more sense as we move forward, but I'm going to rename this body. I'm just going to call it mid for now. And then we're going to use a command under modify called thicken. Okay, now what this does, it's asking for the T-spline body. I'm going to click on it, and then I can type in a distance. So let's just do maybe like 0.1, because the diameter of my wire is going to be 0.1. So I need to make sure I'm doing this exact. So I'm telling it go 0.1, and notice this says thicken type is sharp. I'm just going to go ahead and say OK, and you can see what it did. It took that and it thickened it 0.1 in that direction, and it created a sharp edge. Okay, so let me do that again. I'll say thicken, do the 0.1. Instead of sharp, I'm going to say soft. I'll say OK, and now you can kind of see it's like a soft plastic rolled over kind of edge. Okay, and then lastly, the one that we're going to use is no edge. And watch what this does. It actually creates a second body. So there's no faces in between these two. In fact, and that went to the outer, so I'm going to rename that guy outer. Okay. Then I'll do the same thing again. I'll come in here and say thicken this guy. We're going to go in the negative direction. No edge. I'll say OK. And now we have one called inner. Okay, so I basically have 3 little meshes. I've got the inner, the mid, and the outer. Okay. Okay, so let's focus just on the inner stuff. So I'm going to turn off mid and outer. So we're just looking at the inner body. in form, there is a pipe command. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say pipe. Gives us lots of options. Now I'm going to click on this edge, and notice again it kind of chains that whole edge. So I'm going to click on that, and I get a really weird result. Don't worry about that. I'm going to change the diameter. So I want these to be, remember we talked about our wires being 0.1, so I'm going to type in 0.1, and it's going to create a pipe on these two. In fact, I'll do both at the same time, those two lines basically. Now you'll notice it says display mode, box or smooth. I'm going to change it to smooth. In fact, let me zoom up here a little bit. So you can see there's kind of box mode. And then I'm going to change it to smooth mode. And notice that the pipe is right on this edge. Okay, and because we've offset 0.1, that's going to help us out. You'll see that here in just a second. Now, the only bad thing is that these are open. These are like surfaces. So I'm going to go to my end types, and it says end type is open. I'm going to change these to square, and you'll see that it kind of rounds them over, and it's going to make these into a solid body. Check this out. When I say OK, and I can let me turn that guy off. Here is that, and wait, I'm not going to do it yet, but when I say finish form, these are going to turn into solid bodies because they're capped at both ends. Okay? Okay, so we just did that with the inner profiles. Now we're going to start creating some other wires. So around the mid, so I'm going to turn off inner, I'm going to turn on mid, and exact same process. I'm going to say pipe. It's asking for the paths. Now I'm going to go all the way to the top. So I'm going to grab all of these lines here. And it doesn't matter, where I click. It's grabbing those whole loops. Okay. I want to make sure it's set to 0.1, which it is. I'll say smooth display. You'll see they turn smooth. Now, in this case, I don't have to worry about the end type because they're closed. They're actually, touching each other. They're fully closed. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And I just created all of the wires going around that way. Now let's turn this off and take a look at what happened here. Because we did those offsets, you can see how this wire is touching this wire here, like they're being welded together. And they're not intersecting each other. They're not cutting through each other. Okay? So then finally we'll do the outer wires. Okay. Exact same process. Pipe. What are the wires? I'm going to go ahead and select these tool paths. Or I should just say these paths. Okay. Want to make sure it's 0.1. Display mode is smooth. In this case, I do want to make sure that the end types are squared off. You can see how nice that looks, and you can already see how these are going to be like right up against those other wires. I'll say OK, and we've just created all of the wires basically for this basket. Now check this out. I'm going to say finish form. I'm done creating this organic form. I'm going to say finish, and it's going to look kind of weird. It's going to turn on all of my parts and all that kind of stuff. You're like, whoa, what happened here? Well, let's expand open the bodies, and you're going to see a bunch of bodies, and then you're going to see some surfaces. Well, these are those original, the mid, the outer, the inner. So let's go ahead and turn those guys off. We don't need those. But notice how these now look, they don't have all those little tiny segments. They're all basically one body. Actually, there are a whole bunch of individual bodies, I should say. And I could combine them together. So let's just make maybe the top be the target. I'll just draw a selection window across all the rest of them. And we're going to join all those together. I'll say OK. And you'll see it'll go from a bunch of different bodies to one body. and we can say basket. Okay, so this is a manufacturable basket. Now I could have done the same thing with this guy here if I had spent more time, you know, offsetting and stuff like that. The drawback with this guy is that it's not parametric. I can't very easily go back and make changes. I could edit this form, but it's not going to be as easy. It really won't be parametric. Whereas this process where we you know, told it to be parametric, we didn't use free form or anything like that. This allows me to make changes. And so that's why I wanted to show you the 3 different methods for creating these kind of baskets. And again, just for fun, we'll jump into render. I'll add a quick material onto here. Let's do aluminum satin. And I like to do, so you can kind of see the shininess there. I like to go into my scene and add in one of these, for example, let's just do like Plaza, one of these HDRI images, and it's going to reflect into these materials. So you'll see it takes longer to calculate, but it's going to create a much more realistic representation. So the sky from the Plaza is reflecting kind of in the tops of the wires, and then you can kind of see in fact, if I go here and say environment, you can actually see what's reflecting in the metal. So we got some dark stuff down here, some light stuff up above. Okay, so there we go. Hopefully this gives you guys some ideas. I showed wire baskets, but I also showed some other examples, you know, with like the microphone, with the tool crib or whatever, using rendering materials. But you could create vases that, you know, are made out of wire. Pretty much anything that you could use the pipe command, either in, you know, regular modeling or in the form modeling, gives you lots of flexibility. So I'm going to take a look at the chat real quick and see if there's any questions. Hopefully they were getting answered. Let me scroll through here. Usually I have a sidekick. So let's see, not very many questions. Okay. I see Blaze is on there. Hey, Blaze. Okay, so somebody asked, how do you physically make the basket? So that's what I showed. I think that was early on. Somebody also asked, why not do a new body in this situation? So that's a great question. Probably when I was doing like this one here, you could create new bodies and then join them together or combine them together. Or you could just do the join command already in the command that you're in. Like when you're doing the sweep or an extrude, it gives you the ability to do like a join or cut or whatever. Okay. Let me see if there's any other questions. I appreciate the people adding in the question marks. That makes it easier. Okay, it looks like that was about it for questions. I'm going to have to go through it at a slower pace. So I'm going to thank everybody that was helping out with the questions today. We're all a big family, so I appreciate that. Hope to see you on a future live stream. And remember, with Fusion 360, you can make anything. Thank you.